If you're under the age of 40, you probably know who the Gorillaz are. For these in middle or high school in the early 2000s to 2010s, it'd be hard to miss them. These darkly drawn characters are responsible for massive singles of my childhood. And as I turned 30 this year, I realised this band is now in the hands of other teenagers, for them to enjoy as much as I. Resulting in other teenagers having Gorillaz be their childhood band, and that's fascinating to think about. And then I started to feel weird and old when I started thinking about the fan base. Because Gorillaz is a generational band, there are fans that are alive when the first album came out, and there are fans just getting into Gorillaz waiting for their 8th album to come out, which has made Gorillaz an unmovable statue within this music scene, looming over my teen years and now the teens of today. Which brings me to the question I want to ask today. How is the Gorillaz still popular after 25 years? So with that, we have to talk about who are the Gorillaz first of all. That question right there is so complicated to answer that I put off writing this for about a year. So I'm going to gloss over a lot of details here for your sanity and my own. So the spawn of Gorillaz is the brainchild of Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett. Albarn was, just a ridiculously popular frontman for popular Britpop band Blur. Albarn honestly could have sat on his ass the rest of his life and collected Blur royalties, but instead, he decided to take his career in a much different direction. In 1998, he formed Gorillaz, a virtual band which pulled in influence from basically every genre you can imagine, including rock, hip-hop, and electronic music, which are the foundations of Gorillaz, but in their music you can find dub, Latin, punk, art pop, synth pop, funk, soul, and gospel in the music.
Yeah, this is what I do all my demos on, and I like it because it's got an inbuilt microphone so that I can be anywhere and I can do, just have a guitar and then I can just do 4 and then bounce. I can do like 8 tracks on this.
And Hewlett was an artist famous for drawing the dark and weird comics Tank Girl, which again is very, very popular, who created a distinctive cartoon style of Gorillaz that we know today. And, as a virtual band, the band members are pure works of fiction, which meant they were free to create any kind of persona for the band, and boy did they not skimp on the weird. You have the witless but sweet 2D on the vocals and keyboard, the satanic narcissist Murdoch on the bass, and a child prodigy Noodle on the guitar. And the prone to being possessed, it's a long story, Russell on the drums. And over the years, they've released a bunch of albums, and they date back from 2001 with Gorillaz being the first album, Demon Days, Plastic Beach, The Fall, Humans, The Now Now, Song Machine Season 1, and now Cracker Island. Now fans, do not worry, I've noticed I've totally glossed over the lore for now. Don't worry, we'll be getting to that later. Arguably, Gorillaz peaked in popularity during the days of Demon Days and Plastic Beach, but they haven't exactly faded away either. Their new singles have gotten 50 million plus streams on Spotify, and their new album features artists including Thundercats, Tame Impala, Beck, and Stevie Nicks, showing that they have enough cultural cachet to land massive musical stars from past and present. Now, so much of Gorillaz' popularity defies common sense. Creating a virtual band just feels like a gimmick out of the late 1990s and early 2000s, but it managed to somehow be ahead of its curve. Their music and their style is quite a bit darker in tone than what we would typically expect of pop, and yet people couldn't seem to get enough of it. The idea of mashing together so many genres should be also a recipe for disaster, but instead ended up making a wonderful fusion cuisine. So what gives? How has this band managed to defy expectations for so long? How has this band managed to transcend its gimmicky background to produce enduring singles and hipster-approved albums alike? Well, the answer tells us as much about music as they do about business. So number 1, their biggest hit singles are really good, as are their best albums. So, marketing rule number 1, the product actually has to be good, with a few expectations, but usually good. What's interesting is that Gorillaz have succeeded on what are often seen as mutually exclusive planes. They've garnered the respect of the masses and hipsters alike. And that's due to their bunch of singles they've charted over the years, including Feel Good Inc., Clint Eastwood, Rhinestone Eyes, or Melancholy Hill and Dirty Harry come to mind. Even their newer singles like Cracker Island and New Gold are doing pretty well. And one of those reasons is they know how to write hooks.
They taught themselves to be a cow. They didn't know as many strategies. They taught themselves to be a cow.
These songs are unbelievably catchy and they get stuck in your head, and the bulk of them are danceable. And yet all of them, despite the fact that most could be played at party to hype people up, they're still dark and weird and oddly poetic. Now, as we all know, Gorillaz aren't one-hit wonders. Demon Days and Plastic Beach are generally regarded as masterpiece albums, and according to On Rate Your Music, Demon Days was number 5 in 2005 and 376 overall, and Plastic Beach was number 6 for 2010's music and 694 overall at the time of recording. Which brings us to reason number 2. It's obvious. The folks behind the band are exceptionally talented musicians and producers. I know, that's the hard-hitting analyst you're expecting from Weird Marketing Tales, aren't you? But really, to get to the end products, you have to understand how it's made. The whole concept of Gorillaz requires stitching together bits and pieces from dozens of genres, and especially in their later years, dozens of artists. Done properly, this can make some of the most unique music in the world, but the catch is, it's damn near impossible to do properly. But Damon Albarn already got his 10,000 hours in with Blur, which was formed all the way back in 1988. He spent 10 years playing that band, which was itself well respected by the masses and by hipsters. He took his natural talent and his earned skill set, then he merged that with the litany talent of people who he surrounded himself with. If you look at the liner notes of any Gorillaz albums, you'll see a shockingly long list of people. That's because it's not just one guy's vanity project with a few taggers on. These albums are a team effort put together by experts in their field, headed by a guy who has listened to so much music that intrinsically knows who ought to go where. Now let's take a breather for a second, and I'll ask you a question. What's the fastest way to get noticed in music? Well, the answer would be staking out a unique niche early with a gimmick. Lord knows there are tens of millions of brilliant artists in the world today, all climbing the ladder, but you need a sense of vulgar art of marketing for the pure art of music to be heard by the world. Madonna made a fortune pissing off Christians, and Daft Punk rose above the rest of the house scene by wearing helmets and never revealing their faces. Now, we're all very aware that's not every reason, but it's one of the reasons why they made a virtual band. Draw some cartoon characters, give them a backstory, and insist the music was made by them and not the man behind the curtain. And lo and behold, we're now in a VTuber era. 3D avatars are everywhere we look. So with the Gorillaz doing it so early, it's future-proofed their band. And as believable as the Gorillaz could be time travelers, that isn't the case. Music in the late 1990s was all about real people. It was a flesh and blood period of rappers beefing one another and sweaty dudes in flannels doing drugs and rock and roll. It was very, very human, and Gorillaz were humans, but with a Z. So how do you make people care about fake people who don't have a sordid histories or beef with real life people? Well, they built an obsessive fan base of their super complicated lore. I told you I'd get to it.
Attention, all Gorillaz fans. Murdoch is in prison. He needs your help. To escape, he needs a phone, the coordinates to El Mierda, and a couple of free Murdoch packs. All he needs is your credit card number, 3 digits on the back, and the expiration date. But you've got to be quick so Murdoch can escape the sewer and get back to Gorillaz.
Gorillaz intuited that a huge part of music as a social experience were the stories that fans told to one another about the bandmates. These stories were as much as part of the music as the music itself because it helped create the culture. Gorillaz simply took that concept and put a postmodern spin on it. Early in the days of interest, Gorillaz started telling a story, building up its lore piece by piece through blogs and videos, forums, and eventually social media. And the backstory is so complicated that the summary on the Gorillaz wiki would require 40 pages to print. Yeah, you heard me right. 40 pages for the summary. So I'm just going to let Murdoch tell you how the band formed.
Oh, so what happened was I was out one day on a nicking spree, hoisting we call it, on the rob.
August 15th, 1997, first time we met.
Yeah, like I say, I was out robbing on a nicking spree, yeah, right? And what I had in mind was to crash my car through the front window of this music shop and then steal a bunch of the keyboards, and form a new band.
It was the shop I was working in.
So I crashed the car through the window and it landed straight into D's head. Amazing, direct hit. Knocked one of his eyes straight out. Put him in a coma immediately. I got arrested for that, and my community service, my sentence, was to look after this silly sod.
I don't know what I did wrong.
Obviously, I abused that position and took the opportunity to bully him to within an inch of his catatonic life. So, one time when we were mucking about in a car park in Nottingham, 2D actually went through the windscreen. And I think it was that second car accident that actually brought him back round. Yeah? Because it knocked his other stupid eye out. But I'll tell you what, when he stood up, wow, what an image. Tall, pretty, blue spiky hair,
No eyeballs.
no eyeballs. I knew that he had to be the front man.
So from that snippet, you can see it's weird and oddly incoherent, but weirdly coherent at the same time. Nevertheless, the point is to put these weird stories out there so that people can retell them. And in doing so, they establish a loyal community early on of people who are truly obsessively interested in this kind of storytelling. Then they pull in the people from the fences, and then they just intrigue people every now and again because they're the Gorillaz, they're a weird band. Once you have a loyal community, every product launch in this case, every album launch becomes infinitely easier. So your marketing team can put their feet up, as there are fans that make websites like Gorillaz for Beginners to get people into the band and to show off how awesome it is. Which brings us to number 5. Gorillaz are constantly collaborating with some of the hottest names in music. So you may or may not know this, but Gorillaz is broken down into 7 phases, along with their recurring band members. It doesn't take long to see that one of their trademarks is collaborating with other popular artists. They've been doing this from the very beginning of their career. And if you scroll through the Gorillaz wiki of list of Gorillaz collaborators, you'll find an absolute effing ton of them. And I think if I counted correctly, it's around 250. This approach to collaborations has a couple of advantages that contribute to Gorillaz' longevity. For one, it's built in co-marketing. They're always pulling super big names into their orbit, and no doubt getting a lot more attention because of it. And it also keeps their music fresh, because having a revolving doors of musicians stops your band from going stale by wallowing in some outdated backwater genre. So we know they're exceptionally talented. They have a unique gimmick, an obsessive fan base, and are collaborating with every artist under the sun. But you know what else they did? They were making dark pop before it was mainstream. Gorillaz' music is dark in a way that much of popular music from 2000s and even 2010s was not. It's easy to forget in the era of Billie Eilish that dark, moody pop music has not been popular for that long. If you look at Rate Your Music, the closest thing you can find to describe what I'm talking about is a chart dealing the number of albums released in the genre of alt-pop by year. You can see by marked interest starting in 2014, followed by an explosion in the pandemic of 2021. Gorillaz have a marked, dark and weird, but nevertheless catchy song since 2001. Because their genre choice is getting more popular and they're ahead of their curve, Gorillaz benefited from it and has proved to be a surprisingly enduring band as a result. Now, onto the promotional point. Gorillaz is constantly reinventing its image, which makes it easier to stay relevant. Whether you're talking about David Bowie or Taylor Swift, it seems that the surest path to culturally relative lifer is in the music business is to keep changing genres. The strategy isn't without its risk, of course. Gorillaz have put out some of the stinker albums, but they've also put out really exciting ones. That's just the cost of experimentation. Sometimes you nail it, and sometimes you don't. But people tend to forget the failures in the long arc and remember the successes. Being aware of this and brave enough to stay the course, though, takes a rare level of dedication. Their sound started out based in rock and the grimy urban UK hip-hop scene of the early 2000s. It morphed into something between dance music and underground rap by the middle of the decade, and it turned into full-blown synthesizer heavy art pop by 2010. Cracker Island looks like it's going to be dance-heavy releases, slotting into the nicely with the disco revival fever of the 2020s. Even her art style is shifting from comic-style flat characters to CGI models. The fictional characters are even aging, with Noodle having gone from being a small child to a woman in her early 30s. This plays a huge part in why we're still talking about them. So, final thoughts. Whenever a musician or a band stays popular for more than a decade, it always gets me wondering. To pull that off is incredibly difficult, and very few manage it. Yet here we are in 2023, talking about the Gorillaz like it's 2005. To me, this isn't just a story about a popular band and their antics. This is a marketing tale, and one we can learn from. So next time you hear Feel Good Inc. on the radio, think about what you can do to create a community willing to vouch for your business 2 decades later. If you liked that video, then subscribe, and make sure to ring that bell so you can see when our next video goes live. And, talking of those videos, why don't you check out one of them today? And if nothing takes your fancy, check out weirdmarketingtales.com where we have all kinds of weird articles written just for you.